Good evening. Welcome to the world tonight. I'm Peter Capote, joined with Adam Wallace. As usual, we have a show to present to you, even if it is the time of the year where it's getting a little slow on the news. But anyway, going straight to the historic anniversary of this week, Adam can explain a significant event that doesn't feel like it was 10 years ago.
Yes, so Peter is referring to the 10-year anniversary of the Arab Spring. So, as an overview, the Arab Spring was a wave of anti-government civil protests, uprising, and armed rebellions from across the Arab world that started in 2010. What began as a people calling out their authoritarian governments, high food prices, and low quality of life led to protests across Tunisia, which grew to a great extent. In Tunisia, they toppled the rule of Ben Ali, who reigned supreme as a dictator for decades. It spread to other countries, Bahrain, to Libya, to Egypt, to Yemen, and to Syria. In Libya, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, civil wars grew out of discontent as dictators repressed people calling out for their freedoms. In Bahrain, a brutal response led by police forces crushed protesters who gained little concessions. In Egypt, the 30-year reign of President Mubarak collapsed over 18 days. And it didn't stop there. Street demonstrations took place in other Arab countries like Iran, Lebanon, Kuwait, Jordan, Algeria, Djibouti, Oman, Sudan, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, the Western Sahara, and Morocco. So, what started this colossal shift in the Middle East and North Africa? Well, it started as one man selling food in the street. Uh, Mohammed Wazizi was out as a fruit vendor, and when the police tried to confiscate his cart over the pretense that he didn't have a permit, he went to a local government agency because he instead stated that they were actually trying to extract a bribe out of him, and the local government did nothing. And so, in that silence, he set himself on fire outside of a building to try and raise awareness of his plight, and he died weeks later in hospital. Now, what grew out of that one death, that one sacrifice, as it were, was this colossal movement, and particularly was helped by the aid of social media, which allowed this single person to actually relate or to become a figurehead for people across the Arab world. So, what can really be said of the Arab Spring? And I think the most important thing is its weight and how it really has contributed to changing the region. As I said before, it factored into the start of the Syrian civil war, a conflict that is still going on today. Again, other civil wars like Iraq and Yemen. A civil war followed in Libya after a power vacuum was formed out of Gaddafi's absence after being overthrown. And again, the instability and subsequent coup and unrest in Egypt continues to this day. And it can really be said to sort of be one of the greatest demands for democracy, not only in the region's history, but as well as the world. And I think that's the real fascinating bit about what the Arab Spring showed, is that despite this idea that I see a lot of people present that democracy isn't something that people in this region want and we can't force it upon them, but when it organically grows out of people wanting change, it's ultimately not their it's not the incompatibility of the Arab world and democracy. It's how ingrained repression and authoritarianism is that can cause these great movements to be repressed. Peter, I'm just going to pass it to you for a second here and ask, what do you think is the monumental impact of the Arab Spring?
Well, I remember the Arab Spring a little bit. just because I was around the age, I started to. I'd always had interests in following politics, but more in that time, and it was, of course, very strange to see, process of a few days, a small movement in Tunisia, that started against the protests of the regime at the time, would spread out, become a full-on regional thing, and took out people who no one could imagine, being taken out. I mean, President Mubarak of Egypt, a very powerful man who for decades was one of the most powerful and important people in the region, was swept out in just a matter of days by pressure. You saw.
I mean,
Oh yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
I was just say with how just thinking how short this is. The 23 reign of Ben Ali, who was the dictator of Tunisia, was taken out in just a month.
Yeah, a month for a man who had brutally gotten his way to the top and had been very efficient in making sure no one had taken his role, was ousted in a month. And there was a hope, obviously, but obviously, the Arab Spring, unfortunately, for all the glory it brought in the beginning, also has brought a lot of chaos to the region. In the end of it, I mean, the Syrian civil war, the rise of ISIL in Iraq, the destabilization there, and also the fragmentation of the region more into the Iran, Saudi Arabia, spheres of influence. I do think that the conflict itself, I mean, the Arab Spring as it is now, I mean, can be looked. I think, obviously, I'm not a historian. I don't study history, but I think in time it may be seen as where the Middle East began to shift from what people had historically known about it to more to what we have today, which is more of a Middle East that is on, sides on, who's the big player. And I think the other point is, that and in some cases, a lot of the core values of the Arab Spring. So, I mean, in Egypt, President Sisi, who played a big role in getting Mubarak to resign in 2011, now holds that office, same office with a lot of these same powers that Mubarak held it with. I mean, Tunisia is the only good success story of the Arab Spring, and even then, its leaders are people who, in one way or another, were involved in the other regime, whether directly or indirectly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you really just have to look at some of the, out of the actual strength of people's will. Because of the repression, sectarianism only grew in the region intensely. You have to look at not only smaller protests in, say, Bahrain, where it was a predominantly Shiite minority protesting against majority protesting against Sunnis, but it also happened in Shia dominated regions in Saudi Arabia as well. And really, you see out of the response, and ultimately as well, out of the subsequent growth of political Islam in the region, the sort of more monarchy-based Gulf states becoming far more as sectarian in their beliefs. And we also have to look at the fact that the repression and ultimately inability to have a peaceful transfer of power in Egypt and in other regions allowed for the rise of ISIS. And so out of these dictators' desire, these dictators and kings' desire to remain in power, allowed ISIS to ultimately rise up and seize the instability, and that itself has increased sectarianism. It has also increased instability in the region. So you really have to think about the fact that the inherent desire of dictators to remain in power is only made it much more difficult in the future for any real popular will to actually really, get itself out there. Because despite them being far more sustained in these protests, they're happening far more often. And despite the repression being great, people still feel able to voice their will. nothing really seems to shift. Gone are the days of, as we've said before, only days of or a month of protests being able to oust um, people who have been in power for decades. It's changing significantly now. So out of what would have been a fantastic time on the ground, not nothing has actually really, besides Tunisia, led to anything greater, because the civil war in Yemen has become one of the worst, or almost one of the worst, human rights disasters in modern history. And same with the Syrian civil war, where millions are displaced from their home, chemical weapons are being used, atrocities are committed. It's a very wide-ranging conflict, or set of conflicts, which have led out of, as I said, dictators wanting to hold on to power. So I think the main important thing to remember as we look back upon the importance of the Arab Spring is to remember that ultimately, despite the inherent will of the people, these conflicts and the actual organization people have to go through, and the ability of them to organize, and how much, how long they have to sustain these protests, people are able to learn from it, and hopefully it will allow them to actually get the goals that they desire, and achieve democracy, if that is their will.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with the Middle East, I would say, not to beat the subject of death, is I think a lot of.
Sorry, say that again, because your mic cut out by.
Oh, my apologies. I think a lesson to be learned from the West, with a lot of Middle Eastern countries, especially in this push, for liberalization, is I think a lot of Western powers, with good, had good intentions, but at times I think didn't understand, I think, the nature of how the Middle East works. I think, we put the model that we used, the West, with a lot of the former communist countries involved. Okay, people will like freedom, embrace it, and whatnot. And as was the case, inevitably, the issue in the Middle East is the definitions of freedom and democracy are very different than, say, the definition of freedom and democracy in the Czech Republic, or or you people are getting my point, or former communist, bloc countries.
No, yeah, I agree.
So speaking of, I think we've hit that good that subject in a very good manner, and so apologize to people for that little awkward, phrasing at my last comment. Moving on, we can move on to the other country in the region. Did not have the Arab Spring because it is currently the only democracy in that part of the world. That is Israel, who this week is at political fun with one of Benjamin Netanyahu's former ministers announcing he was going to create a new political party. That's right, folks. There's another Israeli political party. So what is occurring is, I'll let Adam explain a little bit of what's happened this week with the new party been created, and other internal movements across the Israeli political.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this last week when we, drawing close to the end, when we were talking about normalization between Israel and Morocco, I believe. But what essentially happened, and I'll just go over again what I had said, was Gideon Saar, who is a former Likud MP, and also a very, very popular MP, because he sort of has for a very long time represented that anti-Netanyahu faction within Likud, and ultimately even challenged him to a leadership election in, I believe it was 2019 when this took place, and ultimately he lost there. It was about 75-25, so for Netanyahu. So clearly he wasn't too popular, but still there was some shifting about anyway. The point is that point I'm trying to make is that he is a very popular person, and he has formed his new party called the New Hope. which has its own controversy because initially it was supposed to only be a slogan, but after some journalists made fun of it because of its connotations to Star Wars, as in Star Wars: A New Hope, it seems like the bad PR has sort of shifted itself, and he's settled for the New Hope, which I think is it's a name. Anyway, so with this new party, it has found considerable support, not only in polls, and the party is polling high at around 20 seats out of 120, with the previously dominant Yamina, which tried to represent this anti-Netanyahu right, down from the low 20s to the low 10s. And another anti-Netanyahu party on the sort of more centrist side, Yesh Atid Talem, is also suffering a similar squeeze of support. And the ultimate the actual lead from Likud is only about 27 seats to 27 seats to 29 seats. So Netanyahu is losing his lead significantly. So there's also other elements of support that the New Hope is gaining. It's gaining it from internally within the Knesset, which is the Israeli legislature. He's got so far, Saar has the support of the two MPs from Derek Eretz, which is a party that split from Talem, which was a member of the Blue and White Alliance led by Benny Gantz, who wanted to join with the government while Talem itself wanted to stay away. I hope that doesn't sound as too complicated as when I wrote it out. And so they've decided that they'll back Gideon Saar, and also a former Likud MP has also joined the party. So this Likud MP is called, or former Likud MP is called Yifat Sasha Bitton, who chaired the Knesset Coronavirus Committee and has been very, very critical of the government's response. She even denied certain measures being able to be passed, and when you have that from your own internal support, from your own internal party, there were clearly some complications growing there. Now, so for some of you may be listening and going, "Wow, fantastic! A anti-Netanyahu politician who isn't as outwardly controversial as someone like Naftali Bennett." Well, I'd probably want to hide that away and say, "Oh no," because Saar is a very right-wing politician in terms of like the Western sense. He supports settlements and agriculture in the West Bank and expanding those, and also the Golan Heights. So we have clearly something there which wouldn't be too popular. He's also a supporter of judicial reform, which is another thing that the Israeli right like to hold up as being high. So there are clear difficulties there if you are on the center. But looking at the kind of support that the New Hope is getting, it really does seem to be coming from the center, primarily because a lot of voters in Israel who are anti-Netanyahu just hope that this could be the one chance of ousting him. Another interesting development before I close up on why this is important and why a new election looks like it will be coming is Avigdor Lieberman, who runs the Russian Interest Party in Israel, is a very vocal supporter of having his party, along with Saar, Naftali Bennett of Yamina, and Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid Talem, to merge into one big anti-Netanyahu bloc to try and fight in elections that are upcoming. So if anything like that was to go ahead, and to be honest, it could be unlikely given how great the policy differences are between some of the parties there, it could be an issue. But finally, I'll quickly, I know you're all getting bored of my voice, but I will go on to the fact of why an election looks like it's coming up. So this government, which formed in May at the height of the coronavirus pandemic, has sort of been noted by being very disunited between, as I said, Netanyahu's Likud and Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party. So 2 weeks ago, a bill was submitted by Yair Lapid, which sought to dissolve Israel's parliament, and it passed a preliminary reading in the Knesset. And it still needs to pass a few more votes, but it is becoming quite closer to actually becoming a law. which would ultimately set the election date for, I believe, around March time. And the reason that this bill looks like it'll be passing and it looks like the Knesset will be dissolving itself is because a budget is likely to fail to be passed, which has its own hosts of reasons for not wanting to be passed. And the summary of it is basically blue and white don't want to pass it because they feel like Likud is going to go back on their initial agreement, which was to basically shift over who would be prime minister next year. They were hoping that it would be Benny Gantz, but it looks like, or Blue and White have claimed that Likud is looking like they'll go against that. And so Blue and White is hoping to end all of this now and go straight to new elections to try and oust Netanyahu by not passing a budget, which automatically dissolves the Knesset. So yes, that is the brief summary of weeks of developments of Israeli politics, and we will make sure to keep continuing it because I sure do love Israeli elections. This, if it does go ahead, this will be the fourth one in just under 2 years.
Indeed. My only commentary on that is I think would mostly echo what Adam says. I think it's quite interesting also when it comes to Blue and White to really see how much of a fall they've had. Benny Gantz, something like 24 months ago, was seen as the future of the Israeli opposition to Netanyahu, could end Netanyahu's long reign of power. But we've seen Gantz misplay his calculations and absolutely now get dragged by his now alliance with Mr. Netanyahu. Now, obviously, we don't know the final result. Of course, Israeli politics being Israeli politics, there could be mergers, there could be alliances, whatnot. But it is interesting now to see that the right in Israel is getting more and more united on the goal of defeating Netanyahu. Just can't seem to agree on whom that title should go to. Prior to the announcement from Gideon Sar, the Naftali Bennett's party was polling very well. They've started to hit a bit of a slide. Gideon Sar is now the big story of the lead. We have Yashar Al-Bid, who was a former minister of finance for for Benjamin Netanyahu, also beginning to poll well. Who did this? So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see where we're heading with this with the Israeli election. I think it's I wouldn't count Benjamin Netanyahu out at all. I mean, the man is a winner. People may hate him or love him. I mean, obviously, I know lots of people have very blunt opinions on him, but there isn't denying the fact that he knows how to win. But it will be interesting to see how he runs this election, because his usual staple gun is being a good crisis manager, and arguably with COVID, he hasn't been very good. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out with the Israeli public, and how this time he pulls out of the trick of his sleeves. And if he does suffer loss of seats and a possible defeat, who is the person that would have to get the musical chairs of getting into the job of prime minister? Because as Adam mentioned, there are many different names who I would not doubt have a very compelling interest to want to be the next prime minister of Israel.
Yes, especially because, oh my lord, you'd have big boots to fill after Netanyahu. And just imagine, because we've become so used to Netanyahu as the prime minister of Israel that it would seem odd if he wasn't. And also, the key thing to look at, if he does get ousted, Israeli presidential elections are next year as well, and they will happen in summer of 2021. So the possibility of Netanyahu losing in March just to go straight on to running for the presidency is 100% a possibility. And who knows, because my lord, Israel is just wild like that. I mean, we have a poll from the 11th of October 2020, and I should add, it's only just one poll, obviously. But despite the fact that Netanyahu hasn't stated he's going to run, he polls at 23%, which is the second highest candidate to Miriam Peretz, who is more of like a civilian figure, and is more of a teacher who talks about the IDF and other such things.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact he's still getting 23% is just insane to me. Yeah, I think with that note, shall we continue along with election corner, as we would just seem to be in at this moment,
Yes.
where we're going to talk about the rise of the Centre Party in Norway. And this is a very controversial party. It's an agrarian, populist party which places itself sort of around the centre. It's anti-EU, and I think, Peter, do you wanna describe the situation?
Yeah, so obviously Norway has elections coming up next year in September. The current conservative government, led by Erna Solberg, and its coalition have been on very thin ice, especially since one of their larger partners pulled out last year when the Progress Party withdrew. And since then, what we've seen, historically, the Labour Party of Norway tends to get the most seats and votes, usually because they occupy that big lane. But we've seen in recent months, at the expense of arguably all the smaller parties, that the Center Party has gone from being the third, fourth place party, depending on the poll you're reading, to surging to the first place party. And they've done this by embracing I can't even say populism, because even there, some of their measures wouldn't be considered populist. They just, embraced a lot of what would be said, odd, ideas into their thing. As Adam mentioned, they're anti-EU, egalitarian, and also very, critical of market-based economics. The current government maintains in Norway, and they've skyrocketed. They are now currently in first place, with the Labour and the Conservative Party, the historic top two, fighting each other out just to be in second place. And as a result of the Centre Party's surge, it actually comes at the expense of many of the Conservative Party's allies currently in the cabinet. If their results, as pushed today by two polls out of Norway, and if you want to see those polls, I would recommend going to Europe Elects, fabulous site, a sister network of Adams, as he is on the other side, as they joke, of the world in terms of elections. It's quite interesting. Their current leader is, and I'm, apologies, folks, it's the Scandinavians. So I pronounce butchering ahead of time. Trygve Slagsvold Vedum, very much a former Minister for Food and Agriculture under the last Labour government, who's basically taken a very populist approach on things. And it would say, yes, and as mentioned in the chat, yes, he has referred to nationalism as a positive force phantom. So quite an interesting personality who is either polling it right at first or just behind and second currently, which would be an earthquake in Norwegian politics, as the Centre Party hasn't actually come in from the first in an election since the 1970s.
Oh my god! I just checked the chat and we have Archangelic back. I had no idea. It's been so long. For our viewers who may not know, all 7 of you, Archangelic. No, I'm just is someone who is in the comments of the YouTube a lot, and now we're just back again. This is wild for me. But yeah, I would just add just a few things I'd say there. So the real interesting when looking at the Centre Party is they are at this stage hanging around, as you said, first place in some polls, second in some other, and third as well. But the real interesting thing to look at here is, why are they ahead? Mm-hmm. And this has 3 main elements to it. So as you said, the government is in a bad shape, with a coalition partner having left last year. So that gives, sorry, not last year, recently. So that gives the impression of an unstable coalition. The main opposition party isn't doing well either. Their leader apparently doesn't give a very good impression, and they can't take advantage of that whole "the government's bad" kind of approach, because they both seem equally chaotic. Sort of a Nick Clegg if Nick Clegg was successful, it seems. But anyway, another element is that the centre is taking a lot of populist positions in the public debate. So, for example, they want to leave the European Economic Area, yet at the same time, they want all advantages that would require EU membership. So clearly, the kind of approach they'd go for is, we have a bad deal, let's renegotiate a better one, which is what people really like to see. And the real interesting element, the question behind this, is, could it carry over to an election stage? Because their campaign infrastructure, according to people that I've talked to about this within Norway, is not as developed as the other two main parties. So the real question is once that is geared up, could they continue it? And then the other element to ask is, as a main leading partner in government, or the main leading figure, who would they coalition with? Because that in itself has its own questions, because that constrains them, obviously. Do they go? Would it be possible for them to go with the Labour Party? Who else would they have to develop themselves with? Would it be the Liberals? Would they even want to consider going with a fellow ALDE member in the European Parliament? So yeah, these are interesting elements of which have to be answers. Sorry, when I said in the European Parliament, I meant they share the same party as each other. But anyway, so the point is that where first of all, where does this lead? If they do get into government, can they carry out on a lot of their populist messaging? And also, what is their role to government? Because ultimately, they, despite their current polling, they still would be nowhere near actually being able to enter government. So
I think that's a fair analysis. I also think another thing is Israeli labor itself, not Norwegian labor. Apologies, the joys of speaking about labor parties has also had its issues as well. With its current leader, Jonas Gahr Store, very much been criticized for times lacking the charisma to do what needs to be done to get the Labour Party ahead, because obviously the concern of many in the Labour Party is that, with, as Adam mentioned, the concerning state of the current Norwegian government, that they're not taking advantage of it. If anything, they themselves are also falling behind because they just come off as boring to the public in terms of actual caring interest of and people of why they want to vote for them. And it's just interesting across the board to see a lot of these leaders also face trouble in general. And yeah, I mean, the point in the comment about him being a forgettable politician is probably correct. And while that would usually be a strength, and one time it seems, in this time it isn't.
Yeah, especially because of that general, the unstableness of the government coalition. But if that's all you have to add on the issue, or is there anything else you want to add on?
I just only want to make a little joking comment. Well, not joking. That Norway has said, regardless if the EU and Britain can't actually negotiate something, neither of them would have fishing water rights. Just for all you fun folks who love hearing random stuff and fun, interesting
Brexit.
Stuff. Yes, we love Brexit.
If we get less of it, it's coming close to the end. We're nearly there.
Anyway, we now go back to Israel out of a historic leak, I should say, that came this week, which was alleged that the Prime Minister of Pakistan had high meeting level talks with the Israeli government, which is historic in the sense that Pakistan has never recognized uh, uh, Israel's right of existence. So this meeting has set up a lot of interesting questions about what this could mean. Could this see Pakistan as another country in the region that would, you know, shift itself also on the terms of Israel, or is this just, like many other things, just a quiet conversation of two countries just exchanging things?
Yeah, so we'd very much like to stress how this is not verified,
Yeah.
in the sense that has been denied by the Pakistani government, and has only been claimed by a few individuals. So this one claim comes from a Pakistani counter-terrorist analyst and a UK-based political scientist who writes for a Pakistani newspaper. And he has essentially claimed that an advisor to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Israel in late November and talked about possibly moving closer relations between the two countries. And another prominent Pakistani writer has also claimed a meeting like that took place. So there are multiple reasons, as Peter was saying, why this is interesting. Primarily because Pakistan, or at least it's the general perception by the population, is very anti-Israel. And this is unlike, say, Saudi Arabia, or Sudan, really, where popular will and their possible dislike towards these kinds of decisions isn't really able to express themselves because of the lack of democratic means to do so. But this could definitely be a situation in Pakistan. So based off that alone, I'd probably say that this isn't likely to be a thing anytime soon. I know I'm probably doing a John Kerry thing here where I'm going to say something like Arabs will never make peace with Israel, but then it actually happens next week. But here's hoping my views on this are right. But the actual reason why some believe this to be true is that Pakistan has become increasingly isolated with much of the Arab world due to its developing of ties with Turkey. This has led to Arab nations to increase pressure on Pakistan through demands for debt settling and curbs on oil supplies. A specific example is in November, the UAE banned issuing work visas for Pakistan, and of which, millions of Pakistanis who work in the UAE, who then send money estimated to be in the billions back home, is set to be lost. So the hope is that by developing a diplomatic relation between the two countries, they're able to grow economically, as well as allowing Pakistan to have some friends in the region. There have also been reports of military contacts between Israeli and Pakistani officials, including a WikiLeaks document that indicated that a high-ranking official in the Pakistani army met directly with the Israeli Mossad. So there is a lot here. But as as is the general, Israel and Pakistan have not been friends at all.
Ever.
So yeah, ever. No, yeah, it's partly due to the fact they're so separated. But also due to the fact that the general, I guess, political beliefs in Pakistan are able to be expressed to a greater extent, and more people in there are very concerned with the plight of the Palestinians and developing a two-state solution than saying, the average person in Saudi Arabia.
Well, yes, and there's some elements of democracy in Pakistan. Obviously, that's some, with big context quotes there.
Well, compared to other countries
Yeah.
in the region, specifically.
In the region, yeah, they're full-on democracy. Though obviously the global standards would be a little more of that. But anyway, I think we've hit our time here, and our next topic is just I have to always look for the spreadsheet to make sure I've not gone insane. We have two more topics, so we'll try to get through them quickly. We'll go first to the big story of today, which is that the European Court of Justice announced in a surprising decision that countries can legally ban halal and kosher meats. Of course, both meats are respectively of Judaism and Islam, and the decision was met with absolute backlash and outrage in both Jewish and Muslim circles. Uh, it was for context. This ruling, comes from a law in Belgium. It was passed last year to uh, um, it was passed last year to for animal welfare. And while I understand the point about animal welfare, there is a lot of criticism made by both Jewish and Muslim groups that this law was discriminatory and unfair, and targets them unjustly. Now, it should be noted that the European Union's own legal counsel, Attorney General or Auditor or Advocate General, I don't exactly know which term they use, was also requested that the court not rule in Belgium's favor. What this has now set off is a very much an angry, Jewish and Muslim community, and this comes ironically on the same day the United States Senate is due to vote on elevating the anti-Semitism czar, anti-Semitism envoy, I should say envoy, the U.S. currently maintains into an ambassador, which is to say that the European Court of Justice may have chosen the perfect time to, bring, anti-Semitism up into the mainstream with its, banning, allowing of the banning of kosher and halal meats, most of the kosher. And so, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting subject. Any quick thoughts, Adam? I know we're pressed on time, so I know I want to get the other topic in.
No, I think you covered it finally there. I don't have any particular specialist knowledge on the subject, but I think when looking at general rights of Muslims and Jews in terms of the ability to express their religion, there does seem to be a lot of pushback in Europe specifically when looking at more of the Western world, which I think, do you have any real insight into why it seems to be Europe that's like this?
I mean, as someone who is Jewish, I think, there's always the thought, that Europe in its case has never really had recovered its relationship with the Jewish people. Just because obviously we're only 75, actually only 80 years away for when, Jewish people on the continent were being chained away into camps of death. I mean, I just think it's, I think the issue in the sense with Jews in Europe is that they're seen as very, there's a lot of tropes of the old anti-Semitism still around in many parts of Europe, and in the Islamic case, it's a very convenient, group to go after, especially with what is occurring in the European countries. Now, mind you, just because I know someone will ask, and I do believe in context, the Belgian law is basically dealing with stunning of animals. Since in this case, both Muslim and Jewish law requires that animals not be stunned. Belgium's law requires that they be stunned. So this is where the issue of respecting religious liberties and rights has clashed here. It should be noted that many other European countries do not pass these things, mainly because out of respect for religious minorities. So yeah, it'll be quite interesting to see how this ends up now. It's now legal by obviously the European Court of Justice, but as mentioned, Belgium very shortly may be getting an angry American ambassador for anti-Semitism. So anyway, moving on. Our next topic and our last one before everyone's favorite segment of the week, and I will note, if you haven't, folks, follow us on Twitter at Elections Daily, or follow us on YouTube to be alerted for the show or recordings of the show, as well as follow us on Spotify, Google Audio, or whatever you use for fun. So our last point is Turkey and the United States in a bit of a news this week. And I'll let Adam explain what this news is about.
Yes. So, almost after what seems like months of the US sort of abiding by the very wildcard nature of Turkey, the US has placed sanctions onto Turkey under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, which is a great name for an act, by the way, which is likely to have several effects. Primarily that of well, actually, I'll start with why this is being done. So the U.S. Administration has opposed sanctions for Turkey's purchase of Russian S-400 air defense systems, which the U.S. has said is incompatible with NATO equipment and a potential threat to Allied security, primarily because it could lead to, because of Turkey's previously anticipated ownership of F-35 stealth jets, which has already been discontinued in July 2019. But there was this idea that by them having the ability to use them both in combat, the Russians could essentially find a way of effectively seeing any weaknesses in the F-35 and counter it if America and Russia was to ever actually go to war.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a very difficult situation here. So Turkey's removal from the F-35 program and now sanctions is the first of their kind against a key US ally, has really exposed how distant the two countries are becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And this is particularly important because of Turkey's key role as a NATO ally. Besides the fact that Turkey contributes the second most amount of troops to NATO behind the United States, it is also set to significantly hurt their developing military-industrial complex and their state defense industry. So these two key areas, which Turkey is seeking to grow, is being significantly held back by the United States, which is seeing Turkey as acting as far more unreliable. So you've got that element behind it. You've also got the fact that the sanctions will affect Turkey's air force, which is made up of lots of older US aircraft like the F-4, the F-16, and they were hoping to modernize because despite the initial cost of an F-35, it works out as being cheaper than having to work upon already existing and very old aircraft, which ultimately cost a lot of money to maintain. So you have the industry being hurt, you have their own air force being hurt, and then also you have the other element of them basically being boxed in by NATO allies. That primarily being France, which has been assisting Greece in maritime disputes between Greece and Turkey, and now you have the United States coming into this role of hurting Turkey economically. And already with President Erdogan of Turkey engaging in increasingly anti-Western rhetoric, it could possibly see Turkey leaving NATO in the foreseeable future. I don't particularly see a Biden administration reversing any of these decisions, primarily because, beyond the fact that it would come across as a bad sign. It's also the fact that Turkey itself is becoming, as I said, more of an unreliable ally. So how do you actually win back an ally like that? Because it sure isn't, just undoing some sanctions. It's going to take a lot more to actually build them back. I don't feel like the US would want to try and compromise on any of those kinds of decisions. But that's the real brief of it all. Is there anything you want to add, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously it's very concerning that the Turkish thought it was a great idea to try to sell American equipment to Russia. As Turkey will very much understand, the United States does not allow for American equipment to be sold to Russia for numerous reasons.
The S-400 is a Russian air defense system, which they would have been selling to Turkey. So the concern was.
Hold on. No, I confused myself around. Sorry. Yes, but them buying the equipment and with Turkey also owning American equipment is the concern that the Russians would have access to our equipment, which is the issue
exactly.
here. of national security, which is what I meant to say. And apologies, folks. I've had a busy week with finals, so my head is somewhat, thinking of other things at the same time. Is with buying this Russian equipment, the concern by the U.S. government obviously is the Russians getting their hands on the F-35, which is America's new fighter program that is basically, one could argue, forcing its allies to use. Really at a very not great cost, but shrug. So yeah, there's the concern on that, and I mean, look, Turkey, wants to develop up its military industry, but as it will find out, the United States has strict rules on what it does, and it's also kind of interesting. This comes right on the backdrop of a U.S. and Greece defensive arrangements getting even more closer. With there have been, as mentioned on the show a few months ago, there's always been the potential, possibility that certain military equipment in Turkey may get removed to Greece, as a last few Greek governments. Very odd to say this, that the Syriza government and the current conservative government there both took a more pro-Americanish line in terms of defense things. So it will be interesting to see if the U.S. fully starts moving more into a Greece direction. Overall,
possibly,
sorry.
I was to say possibly an Egypt direction as well, as
Egypt
their
as well,
main
yeah.
person in the region, as their main sort of ally, I guess.
And the French, of course, would very much be in favor of said decision, as it would make their influence with the United States within defense discussions more powerful. I will only just close on this point. I think Turkey's going to find out very shortly. If you want to stay in NATO, you can't play the double-edged sword. You can't say, yeah, we're a NATO ally here, but we're not a NATO ally here. Unfortunately for them, the rules of the alliance is you have to be an ally 100% of the time. That's even, of course, with certain European countries, buying questionable things from Russia or China, or not putting the money for defense. But I'm not going to go on that rant tonight. But no,
I think that's all then.
Yes.
Wow.
We are now at everyone's favorite time of the show, where we get to see the loser of the week. And I'm surprised Adam has not decided to take a shot at me today. I mean, this is usually where I throw in a jab at someone.
Oh yeah, this is where we make fun of the Lib Dems. But
to be fair, the Lib Dems are just too easy at this rate. That's just that would just be manslaughter at this rate.
It happens every time. And I don't learn.
Hey, as the old saying is, every smart Lib Dem, joins the labor of the Tories.
No, give it a year.
Will you be back? Anyway,
let's talk about other losers beside myself. This time,
before we know it, Adam will be standing pretty patel. I know that's not going to happen. I just needed to have a bit of a laugh.
Well, then we could put me as loser of the week if that ever does happen.
But Adam's loser of the week.
Yes. Okay. So my loser of the week this time is in Africa, and it comes from the ruling NPP party. NPP party in Ghana. So this is a centre-right to sort of conservative party. It's a sort of expected thing you'd find opposing a sort of social democratic centre-left party, and it has gone into this election as the governing party and won 137 seats. The opposition party has gone into this election and won 137 seats. Now, this isn't where the loser of the week comes from, because obviously they ultimately lost seats as well, and obviously that is ultimately never a good thing for an incumbent party. But the real interesting element is in their ultimate loss of seats comes the fact that they had a single independent as the other winner. So you obviously have the other party, you have the opposition getting the same amount of seats as the governing party, but also this independent who amusingly was kicked out of the NPP because ultimately over some internal dispute, and then they go straight back to having to the NPP have to ultimately go back to this guy who left and still won as an independent and say, hey, sorry about the fact we kicked you out. Can you support our government now? And sorry, I can't remember if I said 137. I hope I did, but anyway, as you said, getting tired. But anyway, the point is that but yeah, ultimately they still have to go back to him and say, yeah, sorry about that. But to be fair to the person, and this is sort of what makes the NPP not so much of a loser of the week, is the fact that he said he is a proud supporter of the party, and there's no hard feelings. So yeah, just one off that majority, and he's probably gonna make it for them, much to the distress of the NDC, which is the opposition party.
Yes. Always fun, to see African elections end nearly in a tie with an independent having to make the tiebreaker difference. So my loser of the week, never, of course, as fun as Adams, because it must be
You're not a fun person.
Well, you're more fun person, of course. Must be those big Northamptonshire vibes. So my loser of the week is, mind you, this hasn't really been a big, news week in general. He's probably the one minister himself, the minister for the 17th century. That is Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg, who went on LBC, never really a good sign for Mogg, and said it was ridiculous for UNICEF to be involved in giving food out to starving families in Britain, which is certainly a take from the minister for the 17th century, who, in all seriousness, is a government minister, is the leader of the House Commons. Of course, this is not the first time Mr. Mogg has gotten into hot water for commentary. It should be noted, Mr. Mogg got into controversy last year at the next election for suggesting those at the Grenfell fire were not following common sense logic when leaving the building. So yes, Mr. Mogg has a very big history of speaking a bit out of his own mouth, to which his UNICEF comments received widespread condemnation across the political spectrum, and has basically led to him not being found anywhere on any speaking circuits in Britain. He must be having too much tea times at his association to be booked on any news network. But I now have been told via the chat that
oh God, no.
is a 5G truth. Nice to see that the British Parliament is so full of great MPs.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just take over this quickly. So, so just to summarize with Jacob Rees-Mogg, yeah, he is a loser there. In fact, just to extend the show a little bit, I will talk. So, for those who don't know, I used to be a Conservative Party member, and I joined when I was 12, and I left last year. So there's my sins played out for you there. But I went to the Conservative Party conference in 2017, and that was really the height of my Conservative Party membership. But I actually got to meet Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I had a photo with him. And oh my God, this is a fun story. So I was on one side of the conference hall when I actually went in to the Conservative Party conference, and he was there, and he was standing there, and I said, "Oh, could I have a photo with you?" And he said, "Sure." But then I had to follow him across the entire conference hall, and so he said, "Come with me." I followed him up some escalators. It was a wild time, but it was, and then this isn't the fun of the story. So everybody had their actual cards things to show their identification. on a lanyard, as you'd expect. But no, not Jacob Rees-Mogg. He had to have his on his golden pocket watch, which I only noticed after I got my photo with him. But safe to say that 12-year-old me was not very good at making political decisions. And well, there we are.
Well, to be fair, some would argue you made the wrong political decision by joining the Lib Dems because it's the Lib Dems. I didn't say that, of course. Should note, people, that I am a proud, overseas friend of the Conservative Party, of course.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm glad now that I can say I am a proud hater of the Conservative Party. I've had my restoration, if it were. I went through my bad stage when I was 12, and I am where I am now.
Of course, this is where as some Tory would fire back. That's why the Tories are the oldest successful political party in the world. But anyway.
Oh well, we get it.
Hey now. It's I think Kellic had the best comment in our friend here in the chat. About elections. Where is it? During elections, slide to the left. During government, slide to the right.
Well, there we are.
But anyway, well, thank you, folks. Well, yes, it is funny. I mean, yes, we have Mr. Conservative. That's me. Shocker. I making my views no secret. Mr. Liberal, of course, member of the Liberal Democrats. International Youth Wing. That must always be fun. And then we have our friend, Kellic, who I assume by his own comments is a member of the fun party, as I like to call it. We will not be having a Christmas edition. Thank you for bringing that up. We will not. We will be off for the holiday season. We all know, the people want a break, so we will not have a show next week. However, we will have a show on January 1st, which will look back at the past year and also put predictions for the incoming year. So it will be a very different show.
Yeah, exactly. So the general idea that I have envisioned for it is we're going to be going over the major events of 2020. Obviously, some COVID will be mentioned in that. Maybe how COVID, the big political events that COVID has shaped. And yeah, as you said, predictions. So it's really a place where we can look back. Maybe if this show is still going on, we can look back at the end of 2021 and go, how correct were we?
And we also will be giving out awards, winner of the year, loser of the year, surprise of the year, and all other fun categories.
Yeah, we're gonna make some fun out of it. And to be fair, that's all we can hope for, especially after such a depressing year. So I believe that lines up perfectly for January 1st, which I think is a perfect time. But just to say to Archangelic, who was put in the chat, could I bring some of my own examples and predictions? I mean, if you're comfortable with coming on as a guest, or to be honest, if anybody who listens to this show wants to try and get in touch with Elections Daily and suggest coming on as a guest, that's perfectly fine. Or you could come in and we could see if it could work. But also, if you just want to come into the chat, share some of your predictions, some of your own examples, talk about what the year's going to be like. Then that's exactly, because ultimately, we like to have a bit of a community here. It's not a very big community, but we like to try and make one.
Yeah, so we have, we always thank our loyal viewers, who watch the show every week. Put up sometimes with the fun antics of the two co-hosts. But yeah, we try to have as balanced as opinions as possible. I could be described as a self-proclaimed right-wing nutter. I'm joking, of course, before I get angry voicemail comments. Anyway, but yeah, no, if you want to keep it in the chat, that's fine. We'll have a fun show on the 1st. Lots of fun names will be brought up for titles.
I think I may, despite the fact Christmas will have ended, I think I will wear my Christmas jumper for that show. Once I'm on camera,
I'm gonna wear a bow tie or a suit, probably just for the meme.
Oh, I mean, to be honest, if yeah, actually, no, sure, we'll do that then. We'll come in our finest attire, and we will do the Oscars, but for the year.
Of course, maybe we won't be Jeremy Corbyn fashion people, so you don't have to have any concerns there. Anyway, folks, we've already extended our time. I mean, this is more than usually extra time given in a football match. So thank you. Have a great holiday season.
We hope you get lots. We hope you get lots of books relating to foreign policy. I'm particularly interested or hoping for The Promised Land by Obama, primarily because you know what, I really like not entirely all of the political views of certain politicians, but I always like hearing about the fun stories they have, like travel disputes.
It sounds more fun than what I'm reading.
Oh, well, we can. You know what? If we want to talk about a read for the year, because I've read a few foreign policy books this year, we could do that. There's a lot of stuff we can do.
Of course.
And anyway,
hello, Kellic. I think I'm gonna have to post that. As the next week, as when we come back here, Adam strikes me as the start to wear Christmas jumpers and shit.
Yeah, again, I'm not that much of a loser, but anyway,
well,
instead of people bullying me at the end of the show, we'll end it here. Right, I'm going to take control now. It's like last show. Thank you all for listening. I refer back. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Elections Daily. To continue and subscribe to us on YouTube. To check us out on wherever you get your podcasts, and have a great festive season. And we hope you get loads of presents. But anyway,
I hope you all stay safe, and of course, when it comes time and back to you in the new year, you're well, and hopefully we're in much better times. Hopefully the vaccine distribution is kicking in gear. Anyway, have a great rest of your holiday season, folks. We'll see you in 2021.
Bye.